We had a little bit of an interesting one up here. We got kind of a dual reaction, so to speak. We have, of course, Star Wars here, Episode 4, A New Hope specifically, or back in the day before it was Episode 4, just Star Wars. Back in ye olde, like 1977. So we have a kind of analysis and reaction to Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader, but we also have a reimagining by FXitinPost, and I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce that. We have a reimagining of the scene as well. So I figured we'd go ahead and take a look at the original scene first, kind of go bit by bit and kind of, take a look at a couple things, and then we would go into the reimagining, and we'd have a little bit of fun here today. So without further ado, we're going to not do this full screen, as I'm a little worried about copyright on this, and it probably will still get hit. But I obviously, for legal reasons, don't own the content. I obviously, for legal reasons, don't own authorship of the content. All rights reserved to the relevant parties. In any event, I mean, it's of the era, right? So he is waiting, which is good, it's additive to the scene. Oh, that old tech.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
It really is interesting to go back to ye olde days, A New Hope status, and hear the difference in voice pattern. I love it. There's something very interesting about it, and comparing and contrasting it to to today, right?
Only a master of evil, Darth.
So they're handling these. That was a good first pass back and forth, right? They're handling these more like long swords, which is very fascinating to me, because obviously, George Lucas, very much inspired by Japanese combat, right? Lightsaber, katana are kind of synonymous in certain aspects, but this very much handles like a longsword. So, I mean, if we're going back, I mean, they're squaring up at each other. They're making sure they're keeping the blade pointed at the other person. Pretty fair, pretty reasonable, kind of basic stuff, right? But as they pass back and forth, the way that, they have their initial confrontation, Obi-Wan winds him down, Vader strikes back. The way that they're moving is very longsword intensive, from what I'm seeing. The way that they're doing the arcs that they're doing, Obi-Wan doing that spin, I see as having, that's kind of I think a cinema-ism. I don't see there being any sort of actual tangible value to that spin. You can spin in combat, but you have to remember, like, when you're spinning, what are you doing? You are keeping your blade not pointed at the opponent, and you're showing your back to your opponent, right? So if you're spinning to disengage, sure, you can make that work. But if you're spinning just to get a little extra momentum or stuff, could you do something better by keeping your blade pointed at your opponent and making sure your vector of attack and your angles are just better, right? Are there better ways to do that specific thing than spinning and showing your back to your opponent? I think this was a good first pass. I think going into this effectively blind, again, because it's been a while since I've even touched Episode 4, this very much reads as longsword combat. So it's very, very interesting to watch.
Your powers are weak, old man.
You can't win, Darth.
They're teasing each other with the tips. I see that. Yeah, they're trying. So we actually do this a little bit in Rapier and SCA, where we'll like tap someone's blade because we're trying to bait out the strike effectively. So what you're seeing here is yeah. I mean, I've done this. I've had people do this to me. They're testing to see if they're going to take that bait. So what I would argue Obi-Wan here is trying to do is, while he's hitting his blade against Vader's, he's trying to bait Vader to do a move, and therefore Obi-Wan can kind of retract his blade or bring his blade to a different attack angle and then go in, right? I mean, it's some of these things we can kind of intuit, right? But it's one of those, I think, that like people don't often think about the particulars that go into this. I mean, it is a very pretty fight looking at this. And I mean, for the time period, especially, I mean, this was like what, this was the end of the 70s going into the 80s, right? I mean, sci-fi was all the rage. I kind of miss it. Not that, I was born in 95, but I mean, I do miss this era. So it's interesting to look at this and apply what I've learned throughout the years and things I've done in rapier and longsword and applying it to this. I like what was going on here, and I think it's interesting to see how it evolved, even just going into episode 5 and episode 6.
Was a weak old man.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Interesting. So he takes the first move here, and then they meet. They're keeping close. He disengages. He's trying to get advantage.
You should not have come back.
God, they're winding. Look at that. So they're testing the tip there. They're trying to bait each other out. And notice where they're binding their blades. They're binding it both near the hilt, right? So there's someone who has a little bit more experience than me will know exactly what I'm talking about. There's technically more than 3, but the basic summary that I can kind of give to this specific concept is that there are 3 parts of the blade, regardless of what you have. You could get your K-bar right now. Get out your K-bar. Get out a kitchen knife, right? I mean, obviously, just for like actual like purposes of like observing how it functions, right? Kendo sword, shinai, bamboo, boken, my misericord, right? My longsword, my buddy's rapier. All of these will function the same way because of how physics work, right? It's just how where the differences lie kind of differ a little bit. So the tip of the blade, about kind of like the top third, is going to be the most agile, right? So, I mean, I'm taking my phone right now, right? It's one of those limitations of model. I can't quite show it because model, right? But this is one of those that I could actually show in practice, right? If I take my phone and I hold it like, kind of at the base, so I'm kind of holding it out, phone out, right? And I push the tip of the phone, right? There's not much force behind it, right? Like you can feel how it wiggles in your hand, right? It is the most agile part of your of what you do of your weapon, right? Of your blade. But it's also technically the weakest. You're not binding up on the tip, right? That's just not how that works. Physics will always work against you on that. You could be 7 foot tall, 400 pounds of muscle, and you're still going to be subject to physics at that point. Now, if you move a little bit down, kind of about the middle third, it's kind of balanced, right? It doesn't, you push against it, and it doesn't quite move as much as it does on the tip, but we'll get to this in the last one. But it moves a little bit more than the base, right? So that's kind of your middle ground there, and what we do, a lot of what we do in SCA, especially because I'm a dingus who uses longsword and rapier combat because I find it fun, is that you have to figure out where you're meeting your opponent. If you're meeting your opponent, your blades, they're meeting you in the middle, and you're meeting them at their tip, they're just going to feint all day, right? They're going to break their wrist, they're going to concede the crossing, and then they're just going to go in and stab you, right? That's how that works, right? Your medium range against their light range, what are they going to do? They can't fight that. They're fighting physics. So now we get on to the final part of this, and for it to make, come full circle, the base of your implement, whether it be your phone, K-bar, whatever you're holding, right? The base of it, if you push against it, it doesn't really move, right? But it's not as agile as the middle or the tip. So it's the strong part of your blade, and that's where they're binding at. So right now, this is a contest of strength. One which I believe, I don't remember how this progresses. I do think Vader does win this, or actually we went through this, right? Yeah, because Obi-Wan concedes this, right? And he backs up. So they're meeting on the strong of their blades. This is a contest of strength at this point. Now, I do have to concede, there are many people and other schools of thought as well. Things that I've come across in SCA. We've done I-33 with our local group. We've done Godinho. We've done Capoferro. We've done many manuals, but I have far from a comprehensive knowledge on all of them. And I will state that while I say there are 3 parts of the blade, that is a vast overgeneralization. And somebody with a little more specialty could absolutely point out, I think there's like 5 parts of the blade in that in what I'm describing, but I don't have the required information for that, so I do apologize on that. But this kind of gets the point across on why they're meeting here and why Obi-Wan is going to disengage. So he whines, right? Okay, meets in mid. That's actually really good as well. Notice what Vader does here. So he meets where Obi-Wan is going to be weakest, right? Vader presses his advantage and moves his blade down Obi-Wan's blade. I've done this exact thing with my longsword. Many people with rapiers have done this exact thing. It's because they're trying to not necessarily parry or expel their blade, but the point is no longer on Vader, right? Where Vader is here, he's going to slide down his blade down the length of Obi-Wan's blade, and he's going to try to get that test of strength going again. And Obi-Wan is forced to respond, or else Vader's kind of right in his face. Which he does. This very much reads like rapier to me. I've seen interactions like this in rapier. Very specifically, what is it? Oh god, it's the where you dip under your opponent's blade. Cavazione is, I don't remember, I think it's Italian. It's where like hold your phone out, hold your implement out, right? And then like hold it towards you, right? And then take your finger, it's on the right side, just dip under it in like a V. Just dip under it and go on the left side, right? So your finger pointed at your phone or whatever you're pointing it at, right? It's on the right side. You dip down and now your finger's on the left. You dip down, it's on the right again. Dip down on left, dip down on right. So that reads like a Cavazione to me. I very much like seeing this here. This is very interesting to me. Because that's how that works. Good push.
Ben?
So it's interesting to go back and watch this for a number of reasons, right? It's very fascinating to go back with what I do have. And I mean, I still need to evolve a lot more with my own stuff considered, right? So I'm making an actual effort to get out and do things again. I don't want to talk about how much I spent on swords and how much I will continue to spend on swords because I really love swords. I went to Army Navy and I got some leather gloves recently. Those are going to be very spicy in rapier. Those are going to be great. I'm going to have so much like ability to move my fingers because it's not super padded. Army Navy has a lot of really cool stuff, actually. Anyways, that's off the point, though. So this was fascinating to look at. You can kind of see the tempo that they're going for. This is very much kind of, I would argue, an essay in the craft of lightsaber fighting, and they do treat this very much like longswords, right? Yeah, and when I say there's rapier isms, like, there's only so many ways you can move a sword, right? So, like, you know, you have different schools of thought and different, you know, practices throughout the world over, right? You know, is it that they all talk to each other and there was this intricate network of people talking to each other? Or is there only so many ways that you can physically move your body and hold a sword, right? You notice a lot of dual wielding schools like Musashi, right? I'm sure there's going to be, if you look at Miyamoto Musashi, Niten Ichiryu, I can't remember what it translates to. It's two something one path. I honestly don't remember at this point. I'm sorry. And you compare that to someone like, I think, whatever Florentine's from in Italy, right? Whoever made Florentine, or at least pioneered it, right? I'm sure you could find some similarities. There's only so many ways a human body can move, and a human body can move with two swords, right? So you do kind of have independent schools of thought and practices kind of come to the same conclusions organically, which is super fascinating. So I think this is good. For the era as well, this is a lot better than I remember it, because it's been years since I've watched this. And I thought it was really cool to go back and see how much thought kind of went into this. And I think this honestly transcends a lot of modern media today as well, because there's thought that went into this, right? At the end of the day, a lot of things just feel like visual fast food, right? To use Critical Drinker's line of thought, right? But however, we do have a reimagining that I wanted to really look at today. We have a reimagining that I wanted to take a look at and kind of compare and contrast this and see what they added, what they changed, why they changed it, and does it make sense? So, without further ado, I think this one I can full screen. Maybe. Firefox, please? I don't know why Firefox does that. Anyways. Does have conversion evolve? They kind of do. Where do I get my swords? A number of places.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
It's too big to be a space station.
Very bad feeling about
Caught this tractor beam that's pulling us in.
I think that's a good way to shorthand it.
He says he's found the main controls to the power beam that's holding the
Let's
ship
go
here.
alone.
I want to go
Your
with you.
destiny lies along a different path. Force will be with you always.
Obi-Wan is here. I must face him alone.
I think that was a really good way to shorthand that, though. I really do. That was such a cool way to shorthand all of that by having such a minimalistic yet effective set piece, but able to have overlapping lines of dialogue to show a progression. That was really good. It's really funny as well. As an aside, this is technically off topic. It's really funny knowing how Alec Guinness feels about Star Wars after it launched. That's super funny to me. I think this is more modern cinema, right? That was a really good way to hide his face. I like it. I like it because it's this medium. If this was A New Hope, I don't know if it would have landed the same for me. Like, I'm sure, because we have the benefit of hindsight because, 50 some odd years, right? But it's also one of those things I'm looking at and I'm like, I think for modern cinema practices and modern, especially for a modern video, right? This makes a lot of sense. This also gets both parties into the fight in a very quick manner. I mean, it's only been 1 minute and 21 seconds. Well, effectively about 40 seconds since the actual sequence started, right? So this is a good way to fast track things to happening. I think that there's definitely a tonal difference between Vader, the door shutting behind him and then turning on his saber, versus Vader just waiting there and turning on his saber. There's definitely a tonal difference. I like that they kept that. Good stuff.
Our long-awaited meeting has come at last.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
This definitely feels a little different, but this is also because, well, like chat said, we've built 50 odd years of building up to this, right? Our perception of Vader has changed over those 50 some odd years. Even going from episode 4 to 5 into 6, right? Our perception of Vader has changed. Then you get the prequel trilogy, regardless of your feelings on it, and the advancements that those made, the advancements in lightsaber combat. I think I'd have to double check. I think that episode 3 is still the longest continuous sword sequence in film, but that might have been dethroned. I'd have to double check. But like our perception of Vader has changed over the years. So when we come to a conclusion like this, how this doesn't feel a 1-to-1 like A New Hope, that's not entirely fair and genuine to make as a criticism, I think, because our perception of Vader has changed over the years, and we have deeper understanding, right? You read book 1, 2, and 3, and then there's a reveal in book 3, so you're reading book 1 again, and then you see all the notes that the author made of like, oh, okay, this is clearly foreshadowing to what happens in book 2 and 3, right? I'm trying to find a good example offhand, but kind of escaping right now. I've been on a huge Lord of the Ring binge right now. I mean, it's one of those things where like if Tolkien dropped Tolkien did technically drop like Scouring of the Shire, right? So it'd be like reading Fellowship of the Ring again and going to the whole Mirror of Lothlorien thing, Galadriel's mirror sequence, and then getting to the end and it maybe potentially changing the meaning of that because now you have the Scouring the Shire at the end of Return of the King, right? I'm getting into the weeds here. Point being, I think this is fair and reasonable considering the changes we've seen and how our perceptive has shifted since 50 some odd years ago.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
That was really wide.
Your powers are weak, old man.
So it was a good first pass. So Vader is definitely swinging wide. I will give him that. One of the things that when watching the initial fight sequence, you'll notice is that they're very tight, right? I think they're very much more focused on action economy. I think this is also a product of our just perception of lightsaber fighting changing over the past 40 to 50 years. So when we look at this definitely has modern isms of lightsaber fighting, but Vader is very wide. I would argue he's making it work because it's a one-handed implement. Weight's not necessarily an issue, right? If I'm wielding a rapier with one hand versus my longsword with one hand versus maybe trying to one-hand my claymore, right? You're gonna have slower movements, right? He's able to just keep up that aggressive nature. He's able to keep that march going forward. So he's able to press his advantage. He also is fighting with the strong of his blade. I like that they kept that, right? Here specifically, does he slide down? No, he just keeps bashing him down. I would argue that's German, but I also don't have enough understanding on German schools of sword thought. I'm told I'm very German in what I do. I'm very much told that my opponent is a door. I want to kick in that door, and I want to keep walking through that door. But then again, I also default to longsword a lot. So I guess some of the isms just make sense to me. I would argue, I mean, maybe you could see some German in there. I'd have to really reach out to German, practitioners, those more familiar with German sword fighting than I am specifically. But he's keeping a little close here, and he is just nailing Obi-Wan's saber one after the other, to which then they get into that bind. I don't know if Obi-Wan would necessarily get into the bind. I think this is A New Hope. This is being faithful to A New Hope, right? Because there was winding and binding in there. And I know Obi-Wan is Master of Form 3. It's very defensive. I don't think he hard blocks as much, because he usually focuses on deflects and parries, right? But then again, that's just I don't know how to really take this. Like, I'm trying to work through this in real time. I think that this is being faithful to the original. I don't know if this situation would come to pass. I'm also thinking of like Obi-Wan versus Maul from, was it Rebels or something like that? That was over very quickly. You have to think there's a lot of emotions going on in both parts of this. Obi-Wan is just getting absolutely overwhelmed right now. So optimally, maybe he would parry, but in a situation like this, where quite literally, man does not have time to breathe. It is an onslaught, and that's fair.
Your powers are weak, old man.
Good thrust. See, that spin made sense. Look what he did there. He's going to thrust in. Vader's going to hit him. And he's going to use the momentum to quickly turn and reposition, because otherwise his blade is going to be so far into left field that Vader's going to be able to advance and thrust. I mean, that I would argue is a good use of the spin. And I think that's, one, faithful to the original, and two, recontextualizes it in a more action, economic, and tactical light.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
And I will show you the true nature of the Force.
I do like the reference to Cloud City here, because, where I feel like him using the Force to kind of just throw things like he did in his and Luke's duel on Bespin is much more him than the lightsaber throw. The lightsaber throw, as I understand it, unless I'm missing a comic, and I probably have, came from him throwing his lightsaber in Return of the Jedi, and that's kind of now his hallmark. Like in the Battlefront games and stuff, he kind of just throws his saber. I don't really know the origin of that skill. I'm pretty sure it's from Episode 6, but that one's definitely always been. This feels more Vader than the throw, personally. I do like this. He's able to keep his focus. He's able to use it to throw and overwhelm Obi-Wan. He's able to still advance. I do think that was a little bit of a wild abandoned swing, but that's also to get the fire off of him, right? So that's kind of excusable. That one is a little odd, though. That feels like a strike of desperation. He's advancing, I think, a little too quickly, but Obi-Wan's also backpedaling. So this is like we can talk about optimal form, and we can talk about how you should versus shouldn't engage. But I think that this functions in trying to catch up and chase down Obi-Wan. He's keeping tight. Obi-Wan's keeping tight. Some strikes in there. I feel like this, so when I was talking about him hard blocking, this is what I'm talking about. Notice how he's parrying. Notice how he's moving around, right? He's dealing with parries. He's dealing with deflects. You have Vader, who is very strong in what he does. I feel like Vader's an outfighter here specifically. So Obi-Wan's keeping it tight. He's kind of keeping it in that window. Think like a window between your shoulders down to your hips. That's kind of fighting in. He's keeping tight. He's keeping his action economy pretty tight, right? Vader feels like he's fighting outside of that box. Those aren't hard blocks as much as I feel it's arresting his momentum. The spin here is pretty great. He's going to be able to get a cheeky hit in. Vader's going to be able to block that, and they're going to disengage and go again. See, now they're fighting on more equal footing here, right? That's a lot of deflects. Obi-Wan's moving around. I feel like he's kind of got going at this point. His engine got revved up, so to speak. And now they're fighting on more equal terms. But Vader also is...
Are you safe? For the moment.
Vader is also exhausting himself, too. You have to think about that. So we want to talk about dual wielding, and this is a perfect example of this. Dual wielding is a very good dueling style, regardless of what you use. The problem is it exerts a lot of effort because you're not only dealing with one sword, now you're dealing with a second sword, and now you're dealing with using them in tandem. Not using them as two separate swords, but, weaving them in and out with each other, right? Being able to not cross your own swords. You're dealing with a lot when it comes to dual wielding. Is it necessarily the greatest wartime thing? Would I use it in the melee? No, I'm going to go sword and board all day personally. But when you talk about dueling, which this is for all intents and purposes a duel, wearing out your opponent is an absolutely valid tactic. Generally, fights are over pretty quick. There's generally a pretty clear winner, or it's a pretty close game, right? Just because of how quick they can be, at least of what I've experienced in the SCA, and I'm assuming other things as well, like HEMA. Now, when there's certain combinations, so SCA, offensive with second-hand defensive, I think it's sword and case specifically, those can go on for a hot minute, and at that point, it becomes a battle of attrition. You can absolutely wear your opponent out, or your opponent wears you out and then presses their advantage. That's a valid tactic.
Main hangar across the ship.
Nice, come on.
It's them.
I miss the old voices.
Certainly has courage.
Good will it do us if he gets himself killed? Come on.
I like that, actually. Vader's pressing his advantage, but Obi-Wan is keeping a line of defense in his lightsaber in the wall, pointed between him and Vader. Because what does Vader do? Does Vader pivot his lightsaber over Obi-Wan's blade? Sure, he might tag Obi-Wan, but does that not open up Obi-Wan to be able to maybe get his hand, tag his hand? Right? I think this is a really good progression. Good momentum transfer. He's dirty. See, and that's where this wouldn't even have been a consideration in the original. I'm sure technological advancements aside, right? Like, this wouldn't have been a consideration in the original because, well, so this whole sequence, technically, this has to do with our perception of Vader shifting, right? Because on one hand, we look at this and go, yeah, Vader's a dirty fighter, right? Even the punching, headbutting, throwing fists, force pushing him. Now, I think that comes down to Legends versus canon, and even in Legends that gets a little debated. I think there used to be like an anti-force bubble or something. I don't know enough about it. I'm not that well read on it. But like, even if you argue that the force could be used on people or other force practitioners, it comes down to being honorable. And I know there's a couple Star Wars YouTubers that have talked about like, well, why don't they just turn off their lightsaber mid-duel? It is seen as dishonorable, as I understand it. So you see why Vader is an efficient Jedi killer, especially if he is fighting incredibly dirty and using what could be seen as dishonorable. to be able to press his advantage and close out the victory, right? This is very dirty fighting. I like that we throw the saber throw as well. Once again, I don't think that's necessarily something we'd see in the original. Technological limitations aside, because episode 6 onwards, we now see Vader doing the saber throw as kind of his thing, right? I would argue he's getting a little angrier here. I think he's getting a little more... He's definitely getting a little more aggressive. I think he's getting a little more sloppy because of it, though. He's trying to push his advantage, and I think it's going to burn him out.
Didn't we just leave this party? What kept you?
We are running some old friends.
Is the ship all right? Seems okay if we can get to it. Just hope the old man got the tractor beam out of commission.
I love the cuts back and forth to show the progression. I love it. I think Obi-Wan's getting tired here. You can see that. His movements are less refined.
Now's our chance. Go.
Come on, R2. We're going.
I like that. So the point of this is the first to move and gain the advantage is able to push forward, right? Either Vader or Obi-Wan could do it. Look what he does. He Cavazziones. No, he doesn't Cavazzione. He lowers his blade and then comes in from the same side to deflect Obi-Wan. So gets his blade off center, goes for the strike, pushes his advantage. I think Obi-Wan angle... I'd have to see why Japanese swordplay does it. I think it's because of the angle this hits. If I have to really give an answer, it's because of the angle. So even if Vader pushes, his blade just falls off.
Man?
I do want to find a pair of those gloves. Scalgrim has a pair that's very similar. I very much would love to find some for longsword.
Now you will die.
So that ending has a little bit of a different connotation behind it because he didn't turn off his blade. So there's a little bit of a tonal shift here. I think this is one of those you can definitely look at and have an opinion on, both favorable and, critiques and criticism. I thought this was very well done, though. This is very high production quality, and I thought this was very well done.
Run, go, run.
Kenobi.
Being able to see the other side of this as well was pretty cool.
You were the chosen one!
I liked it. I thought it was great. I thought it was... what's the word I'm going for? It was faithful in the right ways, and there was definitely enough here. Oh, fix it in post. I completely botched that. How did I misread that? Yeah, fix it in post. Okay, that's what the channel name is. I'm so sorry. No, I honestly love this. I thought this was great. I thought that this was fantastic. It was very cool to compare and contrast. Obviously, there's probably some copyright issues with this, and look, as long as it's not a copyright strike, it'll be available. I will do the best that I can, or maybe I'll keep the original version and put it up on Patreon or something. I don't know. I don't like gating content where I can. And that being said, I mean, they clearly put out a lot of good work on this. Allegedly, they have a Cloud City Reimagined on their Patreon. I will not be reacting to that if it's not on YouTube because I don't react to Patreon content. I don't react to locked off content. That makes sure that it doesn't feel like it's disingenuous or sleazy to people putting in proper work, right? There is a line where if it's membership content or Patreon content, don't touch it. Be respectful. Don't be weird. That being said, I thought this was great. Let me know what you noticed in this. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know if you thought this was a good adaptation or a good reimagining. Do you have some criticisms and maybe some misgivings about it? Was this something that really interested you? I know we kind of blew this up into about 36 minutes, so hopefully you got some enjoyment out of it. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you FXitinPost for an amazing video, and I will see you all in the next one.